think first of all that the statement that we heard initially from President Trump's that trade wars can be easily won, that's a substantial miscalculation. I think at the same time influencing the assessment what the sort of lasting impact of the trade war will be is also the question around the global environment. And I think personally the global environment is at the moment rather weak. It has been so for quite some time, and actually since the global financial crisis we've been looking for sort of a new balance in the global economy. So this comes at a very unwelcome time, and at the same time we see that some of the impact is already apparent. We've heard from sort of say people in our network that supply chains are already being rerouted. That is of course much more easy to do for sort of say technologically less sophisticated supply chains, whereas it's more complicated for high tech. So if we talk about lasting damage, there's also another angle. It's not just the economic one, but it's also a system angle. At the moment, and I think if we look back at the last meeting we had in Hong Kong here with the Risk Council as well, there was already some talk about financial deglobalization, or a process of deglobalization that is going to be accelerated because of this trade war. I think one of the things that of course could drive this further acceleration of deglobalization is also the fact that we see that protectionism is on the rise in the whole world. It is not just Trump trying to make America great again, but lots of politicians trying to make their country great again. And that of course spells trouble for the global rule-based system as we've known it. I think this system was already up for revision. Part of the reasons was that it was not inclusive enough, and China definitely needs to be more included in sort of structures of global governance, but that is not necessarily the side where we would see the lasting damage. Lasting damage for China economically, that will still be hard to assess, but I think that there are some indicators already that point to a very challenging situation. That has to do with the fate of the private sector as a sort of, say, a risk avoidance measure. We've seen that Chinese banks have been more keen to lend to their traditional SOE base rather than to the private sector, putting a lot of stress on the private sector and requiring corrections. The second part is that the export sector in China has been under pressure. That is, of course, an sort of an extension of a trend that was already on its way, rebalancing the domestic economy to much more private and household consumption. So in that sense, the question remains that how soon will this be over? If we look at the most recent indicators, the trade war is not easy to win, will not soon be over. So it could spell indeed further trouble to China, but I think much more worryingly to the global economy. So it's not just China. China is operating in this global economy, and this global economy is indeed impacted. We see this also reflected in the World Economic Outlook, for instance, published by the IMF, and we've also factored this into our own growth assessments that we provide for Asia.